We are just waiting on a couple more trustees and then we'll begin. I'm thinking probably around 5:05.
Okay.
The shirt back. We are unmuted. Back.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be back. It's been today. It's all worth it.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah,
way
I
to-
picked up in Velocity Basin with Clem.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Had plenty of rocks, but also had plenty of fun.
Book Grande?
No, that's not right.
Ready to kick it off?
Absolutely.
All right.
Welcome to a work session of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Tonight we're starting with small lot development discussion. And then we have a special meeting at 6:30 to talk about water and sewer rates in the 2024 budget. So do we want to do a roll call for this work session?
Typically we don't for
Okay.
sessions, but we are missing trustee Bierma and trustee George at the moment.
Well, it's 5:08 and I'll call this work session to order.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Sheila and Lucy to present on the small lot.
Awesome. Go for it, Sheila. All right, can you see my screen? The presentation? All right, good. So my thought is tonight, I would go through some information because my goal tonight is to get information from you, to kind of give you information to help you have a discussion and then give us some direction for the policy you want to move forward with. So my goal is to go through this, even go through the recommendations and then come back to the policy discussion at the end. So just so you know, that's kind of where we're going with this. So this is for the small lot development. Why are we doing this? Well, we want to identify potential issues, solutions, so that we can encourage development on small lots to provide some housing opportunity and infill development in Silverton. So what is a small lot? So that was where we started with our analysis. The Silverton Municipal Code, a typical lot size for residential is 5,000 square feet. So we defined a small lot as anything less than 5,000 just for discussion purposes tonight. A lot of the smaller lots that you have were from the original town plat when the town was established. Typical dimensions around 25 to 25 by 100. But when we looked at it through the GIS, we found lots anywhere from 25 to 50, 25 to 150, and kind of all over the place in between. There are also a lot of like really weird shaped lots that may or may not be developable, but that's where we wanted to get you going with some information. So small lot by the numbers, what are we actually talking about? So first of all, by zone district on the right-hand side, you can see the minimum lot sizes. And in your residential districts or in your districts that allow residential development, 5,000 square feet for single family detached seems to be across the board the smallest you can do. So we looked at lots that were less than 5,000 by zone district, and you can see the ED zone district had the most, then your R1A, which I'll show you graphically in a minute, but it was included in your packet. Most of that kind of being that Shrine Hill area. Your R2, which is your multifamily, and then you jump down to the R1, which has the least of all of those, but it has the one closer to the 5,000. So this graphically depicts where all those lots are by zone district. So as you can see, your Shrine Hill area, 7,500 square foot lot minimums, those are mostly where you have a lot of lots that are less than 5,000 square feet. And then in the ED area across on the other side of town. But you also have a lot of lots in your R2 area that you could use. And that's kind of where you might want to put some of your emphasis if you're doing the small lots developments. So then we wanted to show you that there are also a lot of lots that are less than 2,500 square feet. So I had heard that the main goal was maybe let's look at those that are 2,500 square feet and see what we can do with those. But you have a lot of lots that are less than 2,500 square feet that we probably need to look at. And then these are lots less than 2,500. I'm sorry, the previous one was lots 25 to 5,000. So those are the ones that be pretty easy to go with. These are the ones that are smaller. Some of these may just not be developable. So then we wanted to look at your hazard areas. So this graphic right here shows all of the lots overlain with your avalanche, floodplain, and steep slopes. Now, I'm not saying that all of these areas can't be developed. I'm just saying these are going to be harder because there's more steps involved in allowing development to happen there. So if we want to focus on quick infill and small lot development, you want to look at the lots in turquoise on this exhibit, because these are the lots that lie outside of any type of overlay, avalanche, floodplain, steep slope. So these are going to be the ones that are going to be easier, and I'm going to say easier, to develop, because they're not in these overlay zones where you're going to have to do additional studies, additional building considerations. So we wanted to go into policy questions. And like I said, I'm going to go through the policy questions up front, kind of just lay them out there, what our recommendations are. And then after that, come back and really talk about the policy questions for the remainder of the meeting so that we get a clear understanding of what it is, where it is you want to go with these small lot standards. So the first question we had is, are we looking to have small lot standards for all types of uses, commercial, residential, everything? We feel like you should consider it, maybe not in all of your commercial zone districts, because you do want to keep some of those larger groups of lots together. So you could have those bigger uses come in, but maybe in your mixed use zones where you could have commercial and residential together. In your mixed use zones, we really think you should think about either having a minimum or a maximum. You can have a small lot if you do commercial and residential, if the goal is to have more residential. Or you can only do a maximum number of residential because we really want to preserve some of the commercial that we have in this mixed use zone. So that's a policy consideration we think we need to have a discussion about. The next one is the subdivision enforcement. So based on interpretations and how things have been done, when people are combining these lots, they're not going through the subdivision process in the town. They're simply going to the assessor's office, recording a deed, combining the two lots, and then building on it. We think this is an important thing for the town to reconsider. You can go through a subdivision process without making it onerous. You can do administrative reviews where we're simply just looking at the lot to make sure how you combine it still conforms, that you're not creating anything that's non-conforming that's going to hurt you later on down the road. And then the town can also look at infrastructure impacts as far as it related to roads, to water. So you get that bigger picture, and the town gets the bigger picture of what's happening and how it's impacting not just that resident, but all the residents in the town. Next is minimum lot size. What is the smallest lot size that we want to look at for development? We had internal discussions about this. At first we thought, well, what if we just put it out there as, if we create these standards, if you can meet it, you can build on it. Well, that works, but at some point, a lot just becomes too small. And what we don't want to do is create inconsistencies. We want to create consistency, and we want to create clear expectations. So as a property owner, I will know if I go out and purchase a lot, or if I have a lot that I'm looking to combine, what that minimum standard is, and then I can come in and build on it. The idea being that you can still have variance as needed. I mean, you may need something for 1 square foot here or a couple of inches here for setbacks and lot size. But as long as you have that minimum expectation, everybody knows what's expected. So when we were looking at minimum lot sizes, we looked at what's some of the standards. So we do, when you're doing lot development, we look at public health and safety. One of the examples is the 10 foot. So a 5 foot side yard gets you to 10 foot between buildings so that you don't have to have that added expense of a firewall. So that's a minimum typical of a side yard setback. Some people are now doing 6 foot. They're calling them detached townhomes. So they'll do a 6 foot side yard setback, but one of those walls then has to be a firewall. So when we're looking at setbacks, we looked at a 5 foot all the way around. And what does that give us? It gives out on a 2,500 square foot lot, it gives us 1,100 square feet of pervious area or no build area, and then 1,400 square feet of a possible footprint for a structure. Now, it doesn't have to be the entire 1,400 feet. Of course, you could do something smaller. It could be garage and house, but that gives you an idea of about 56% of your lot can have a structure on it on a 2,500 square foot lot, flat ground, if you implement just your simple 5 foot all the way around. Not saying that's what we're recommending, but we were just kind of looking at where can we start with the discussion to give you an idea. Next is infrastructure and snow management. So when you have more compact development, you're going to have less pervious surface, more impervious, more runoff, less area for your snow storage to go. So this is another reason why if we have these subdivision processes come in, we can look at some of that along with when they're doing their building permit. Where is all of this going to be handled? Where are all these flows going to go? Is this something the town needs to look at as more of a holistic viewpoint as we're moving toward more compact development throughout the downtown and the infill area? So then we wanted to give you an example of what these lots may look like. So there's one in your memo. This is the one I think we kind of focused on to give you an idea of what it would look like both from an aerial and a street view. So the first two are your typical 50 by 100, 5,000 square foot lot. First one being 2-family or duplex, as a lot of people know them, or a single family home. Then we looked at doing 25 by 100s, your 2,500 square foot lot. This is a fourplex, so a 0 foot side yard setback where they're attached, and then you would have a perimeter setback of 5 to 10 feet around the entire building. But these could be sold off as individual ownership, or they could be rentals. Another single family with a garage. Then we looked at, do they have to be 25 feet? Could we be creative with what these lot sizes are? So here's one that's 30 foot by 100. It's a single family house with a detached garage. So it's not 5,000, but it's a little bigger than 2,500. Then we looked at some of the lots that were 25 by 50. What could we actually do on those? So a single family house on a 25 by 50, you can do it. There's not really room for a garage unless they come in on the bottom. And if you increase the height limitations in the different zone districts, but you could fit something on there with 5 foot all the way around. Even easier if you go to a 0 foot on the front. Then we looked at also a 20 foot by 50 foot. Could you fit anything else on there? And you can see you can get a duplex on there. Again, no parking, it'd be on-street parking, not a lot of space around it for shared open area, but you can fit it in. So again, it's going to come down to what is the intent? What are we looking for? How compact do we want these developments to be? So here's another way to look at it, just to give you an idea of what they might look like from the street view. And then here are those smaller lots to get you a little bit closer up so you can see how those might look. So what were our recommendations just based on questions we had, what we were looking at, and here we'll go. So I wouldn't be a good planner if I didn't encourage you to build these small lot developments into the overall update to your code. Not do them separately, because a lot of times you'll do something and then it has unintended consequences down the road. It might affect something else. If we want to do it, we can. There just might be the possibility that they have to be tweaked later on when Clarion gets to that section of the code that they're updating, or we might be dictating what they have to do based on what recommendations you get to us. Second one is to create that minor subdivision process. Again, have people go through your subdivision process, but don't make it onerous. Don't make them go to a public hearings, planning commission, and the board of trustees. Put it as an administrative thing. You can limit it to lot line vacations, just getting rid of that internal lot line. You could allow it for just adjusting lot lines so that the lots meet the new minimums, whether it be 18 feet, 20 feet, 25 feet, whatever they are, but allow those internal lot lines to adjust. And again, make that administrative. You can still allow for staff to say, we think this is a little more complex, so we'd like to, bump it up for the planning commission to look at or the board of trustees to look at. But the majority, which are simple, they just go through an administrative process. And it's, like I said, it's not onerous, but it gets you the information you need. I think the whole point of this discussion is creating development standards for those small lots. So we need to establish a minimum lot size. We need to establish what those setbacks would be, what it is we're expecting, what zone districts we want it to go in, what uses we want it to be applied to. so that we know when looking at those standards, we make sure that they address everything that you're asking for. Okay, I already talked about the minimum lot size. And again, I just want to emphasize the only reason we really want to do it is to make sure that everybody knows the playing field that they're coming into. If the minimum lot size is 2,500 square feet, everybody knows that's what I've got to go for. If it's 1,500, then that's what they need to go for. And even if it's different for the different uses, we still know what we're doing, and we're not being inconsistent or being looked at as not playing fairly by allowing one lot to do one size and another not, just because they had to hire an architect and he was creative. Because what you don't want is to have a property owner go through the expense of engineering and architecture only to find out they can't do it. So we're trying to set up the minimums up front so they know that they can, and we can move forward with them. Something to consider is allowing something smaller than just the 25-foot lot width. As I've shown you in some of those, you can do creative housing on lots that are smaller, especially when it comes to multifamily, 18 feet to 20 feet attached units. You can have the smaller lots and you can get more on less land than what you would have to if it was just the 25 by 100. So considering that, these last two don't necessarily apply only to small lots, but we think we want to kind of incorporate them or have them be considerations as the code moves forward to make sure that the infill development is in keeping with the form of what's around it. So that if we do allow these small lots and everything on that street is at a 7-foot setback, we don't want to have something that comes in at 0 foot where it just sticks out like a sore thumb. So try to be in keeping with what the existing form is in the infill development, and then allowing a lot of creative housing types. So instead of just limiting it to 2-plex, 4-plex, maybe there's someone who has a creative idea of doing studio apartments in a one building structure, just making sure we allow creativity for the housing, even for possibly the commercial, just to make sure it all fits. So now I'm going to go back to questions and discussions, but really let's go back and talk about the policy questions and what you would like to see so that as we move forward, we're doing what you would like. So the first question is, how do you feel about small lot development standards applying to all uses, or do we really want to focus on just residential?
If I may, I'd like to jump in with something administrative real quick.
Yeah.
I own a decent amount of property in Silverton, including quite a bit of undeveloped lots. I don't believe this discussion or the ultimate ordinance adopted has any financial impact on me, because I don't believe the price of or the value of the land changes by allowing smaller development lots or larger development lots. But if anybody believes that to be a conflict, then I would consider recusing. I would like to participate. I'm comfortable participating, but I want to just cover that before I participate.
Well, and I think to note, this is a work session, so I think it's important that you participate in this work sessions. So your voice matters here, and if along the way there's evidence to suggest or information that we receive that sheds light on the financial or, monetary value of a decision like this, that's when I would say, speak up.
I agree. I think your input would be really helpful, and I don't have a problem with your contribution. I think it'd be important. But thanks for
Jane.
being transparent.
Yeah,
Great.
I appreciate the transparency.
Thank you. All right, Sheila, sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. So, like I said, I want to open this up to the use question. Is it just for residential, or are we looking at residential, commercial? And then after we get that established, then we can go back to zoning districts after that. But I wanted to open it up for that first.
Well, we currently allow single lot development in BP.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like continuing to discuss small lots for commercial makes sense. But the reason we're having this discussion was to primarily increase density for housing. So I don't think we want to exclude commercial, but our priority is residential.
Yeah, I would mostly agree with that. I feel like I have a slight leaning towards commercial residential because I think those will help address the problem the most.
You mean like
Wait,
mixed
say that
use?
again?
Like if there's a lot that could be commercial residential, I would have
Like a mixed.
like a mixed use.
Uh-huh,
I
yeah.
would prefer that at this point in time because we have such a dire need for housing.
Mhm. Than it being
Just commercial.
excluded and kept in the commercial only option.
I'm saying that if we are opening the discussion to include commercial, that I would prefer they not just be purely commercial buildings.
Right.
I perceived Sheila's question as being slightly different. It was just, are we, in terms of allowing smaller lots than we currently do we want to discuss just residential, just commercial, or some combination? As
Okay.
opposed to saying like, are we,
So then some combination is what.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not gonna limit our conversation to residential.
Okay. Do you want to offer incentives? So if you are a commercial development, you can have the small lot standard if you incorporate residential, or just flat, if you have a small lot and you're commercial, you can do it.
That's more where I was trending with
Gotcha.
that thought, was that if a lot could go commercial, that we encourage it being commercial residential.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super interested in like policy incentives that we can utilize to help add a workforce housing unit or add a rental unit or something like that. I think seeing other communities that have done that kind of stuff, I was just browsing on Telluride's land use today. And, they even go down to like 1,500 square feet lot sizes if you're adding affordable housing. So obviously all those definitions are important, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's super interesting to me to try to encourage the private market to build the kinds of things that we want to see built. That's really where I'm coming from with this, because we can build a few affordable housing units as the town, but if there's ways that we can really incentivize the private market to do different things, that's where I'm coming from. So I personally hope for all options on the table there. Like whatever you've seen work successfully, Sheila and your colleagues, on really, again, encouraging the private market to build smaller units, to build workforce housing, to build smaller units that might be more affordable.
Okay. Another question we had has to do with your mixed use zones. So I've noticed that you have a lot of your ED, you have use by special review to allow residential in. And there were concerns raised by some of the citizens during the discussions that Clarion had about us. And I think it was during Planning Commission or one of the meetings, about losing too much of that economic base by turning it residential. So do you want to have a maximum or a minimum amount of within your mixed use areas that can or can't be residential?
so we've definitely experienced the issue where something that was ED developed more as residential, and then when businesses established themselves in that same area had like neighbor conflicts based on noise or use or traffic, as they became more residential. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's definitely a conflict we've experienced. And I do think we will get to a point where our housing dwarfs our commercial, and we'll have conflicts across the board in terms of like, can people work here?
Yeah.
Even if we have enough housing for everybody. And if we have too much housing and not enough commercial, then it becomes a second home community.
Yeah, because
Ideal for mixed use areas is like mixed use buildings, like commercial on the bottom, residential on the top. And I think we should try our best to encourage that, because that handles both of those problems.
Okay. And I know that Aaron will be talking about this as part of the code update, with even just looking at the ED zone district itself and what's going on there. So it's probably a policy discussion that will continue, but for this, it was helping just guide us where we were going with that.
And Bill had a comment as well.
Well, Sheila, I just would like to comment, and for you guys to know, in my short time of living here, we haven't really had any commercial development in ED.
Yeah.
That's driving what you were all talking about. But I think it would be a mistake, and Sheila mentioned this, when rezoning is examined, to eliminate ED completely. It might be good to rearrange what is currently almost pure residential, which I'm sure you'll do. But to take it out of the picture, I think would be really detrimental. I don't know exactly, I have the answer to what to do with what would be remaining, but obviously the county barn, et cetera, is going to be down there. And keep in mind that situation that we were just kind of peripherally talking about was easily remedied, and the owner just simply did not elect to do that. That could have been remedied easily and inexpensively, and that situation could have occurred. So obviously each situation is different.
And I think Bill is right. I think we have a really high priority on housing right now, and that is certainly the issue that's at the top. And it's kind of like what Dana brought up in our last meeting, where if something is in place, then we don't necessarily give it attention. But I think it's very true. I mean, in my short time of living here in Silverton, have noticed that we also need a lot of jobs for people, and that remote work is a bridge to, I think, creating a more robust year-round community. But we very, very much have a population here that needs work and employment, and I think it deserves just as much of our focus and attention. It's not something that the town can necessarily drive or create, but I think that's one of my big questions on the policy side of this, is because I really am in favor of this infill, and I think creating opportunities for density and units that can be built in, high efficiency ways benefits our community and for a lot of reasons. And one of my questions about it is just precluding other uses and like if we have a large amount of land and we subdivide it, like I can understand this very much so when we look at infill and we have these weird lots and they're stuck in between, and you're like, yes, that would make a great housing parcel. But like I don't know how to policyify this question, but when we look at these other parts of our community, like the purple zone, what you were just pointing out in the map, or where we have many, many units, many, many parcels that are currently just open space, and we start to subdivide those into single lots, and then I think we potentially. My question is how to make density and infill and opportunities for people to build units that they aren't otherwise able to build now possible. How we incentivize private developers and commercial uses to include housing as a part of their development plan, and how we protect some of our connected land so that a commercial use could potentially grow there without it being like parceled out and like, that would have been great, except we have this weird $1,500 house in the middle of this huge amount of property. Yeah.
And I think that was initially one of our thoughts is, especially I think is it the BP that has the 30,000 square foot minimum, some of those, I don't think you want to allow, or maybe you allow them as incentive and we create criteria for them. But I think initially it's really focusing on the residential and the mixed use and the commercial kind of after.
Yeah, great.
We look at it, we try it, we see how it works. And if it works well, then go back. But in the meantime, you're able to save those commercial areas, the larger lot commercial, the bigger development commercial areas for now.
Great.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question, Sally. And I have two thoughts in my mind, and this is useful for the future code rewrite, is kind of putting a pin in the idea that everything should be allowed somewhere. Like we need that, right? We're so small, but there needs to be space for all the different types of possibilities of things. And so as we look into the code and as we look into zones, everything should be allowed to have it should have a place. A storage unit should have a place. A light manufacturing should have a place. I mean, chatting with Deanne at the chamber, there are multiple businesses that we haven't been able to attract to town because there's no manufacturing space or there's no warehousing space or whatever. So everything should have a place somewhere. And I think for me, the framework I take in thinking about this discussion about small lots is kind of isolated, to your point, Sheila, to maybe some of these residential areas, because what I think are a couple wins that we could see with something like this is currently, if someone has a 5,000 square foot lot, that builder or that property owner is really incentivized to build the largest structure that they can on that property. That makes the most money to sell later on. That's the incentive, right? Is to have the largest unit that you can on that property. And if we are instead saying, hey, you might have a 5,000 square foot lot, you actually can build 2 units on it now. All of a sudden, you're changing that incentive from building a large single family home to potentially 2 single family homes or 2 duplexes. And so that in and of itself potentially creates housing that is cheaper. We're not saying it's necessarily affordable, but it is potentially cheaper in the market value because someone takes their 5,000 square foot lot and now builds 2 structures that are sold for maybe half the price of what the one larger structure was. And the other thing that I think is neat about this in residential areas is I think it preserves some of the neat things we have about Silverton already, which is a diversity of housing types and sizes. So like if you walk around Snowden or Reese, you will notice the shotgun house right next to the larger Victorian. And I think people like that. I think the other thing that that does is it preserve some of this diversity of affordability, which I think we've heard a lot about with the richness of Silverton. It's not like, oh, all of our affordable housing is over there and all of our like affluent housing is over here. But by having the option where you have a large structure right next to a shotgun house, it just creates that diversity of community that I think is a shared value. So those are 2 pieces that stand out in my mind of being able to focus it potentially in residential areas. And maybe incentivize it in commercial areas where you're creating some sort of incentive that a developer or a builder adds residential to commercial.
And it tugs on my heartstrings, which I know we're not discussing this tonight, but I feel very strongly about maximum square footage. So if we can encourage smaller units through this and then address that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill.
I'm sitting here for that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I would like to interject some historic knowledge. You remember this town 25 years ago, and if you guys, it's in your hands now, okay? For you to decide whether or not what Sally's talking about. The question is, do you want 1,400 square foot houses on a 2,500 square foot lot? Or do you want people to have yards? And the only way you're going to solve that problem is to come up with a maximum square footage based on lot size. And ultimately a maximum square footage, whether you own 30,000 feet or 5,000 feet.
Right.
Whatever that may be.
That's another discussion for another day. It's the idea of like combining lots to increase the possibility of like.
I think everything you're talking about is a great idea and I think it's good. But keep in mind also, and I shared this a little earlier with my fellow staff member, the size of the house that's on that 2,500 square foot also has something to do with the affordability of that lot selling. So if you reduce the size, and I'm just going to throw a number out, keep in mind, to say 1,000 square foot max or 800, you get 1,000 if you put on a garage, something in the 30 to 40% range of footprint. You still got a yard for your dog, your kids, and your garden and a place to sit. And if you allow staff to do some regulatory design, similar to some of the things that Sheila put on the screen there, as far as how the houses lay on the lots, keeping the theme of the town that you like, making it affordable by saying, hey, 800 square foot house, just to give you guys an idea, and I'm switching hats here, can be 2,400 square feet, 800 square foot. And I don't know anybody in town that's living in one of those houses yet, except for maybe Jim.
Oh, no, ours isn't that.
Yours isn't that big, no. So, you know, I mean, there's not many houses even that big. So I'm not talking about maximum, I'm saying with an 800 square foot footprint, that's still a pretty large house. You just have to build up. Height is another thing you need to think about here when you're talking about, you know, right now we're at 30 and that's kind of a nice overview, but to do more than 2 stories, that would have to change.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of variables that you have to play in.
If you do smaller structures, you put a garage and two.
If you're talking
stories,
affordable housing.
Yeah.
Which is, I know you and I've chatted on over
Yeah.
the years, maximizing the footprint reduces the cost and makes it affordable.
Mhm.
And yet we still have plenty of large lots in town that are for sale that are going to bring in a higher value home.
Mhm.
So if you're looking at employee housing, quote, affordable housing, quote, whatever you want to call it, then that's a significant part that could go into the discussion for the minimum smaller lot size with no negative effect on the larger lots in town.
Yeah, it gives people choices. And I guess a question I have for Sheila is, I really appreciate your input that like, guys, we really probably should be talking about this in relation to the code rewrite. I think the question that stands out to my mind is it worthwhile to implement something sooner? Do we think it would have any effect that a few builders would build 4 new units in the meantime before the code is rewritten? Or if we focused in just a certain area, what would the repercussions be?
I really want to have that discussion too. Sheila's doing a pretty good job driving us.
Yeah.
On her set of questions.
Yeah.
And I think those questions are coming up. Do we want to
Yeah, that's
keep
great.
going or do we want to give
No,
it back
that's
to
great.
Sheila? Because before the meeting's up, I would like to have that discussion
Yeah.
for sure.
I think that's great. Facilitate on, Sheila.
All right. I'm going to take from this that we're really going to focus on residential, incentivize commercial, and then if we want to go back later and do small lot standards for all commercial, we can. But right now we'll focus on residential emphasis.
Great.
All right. Okay. Let's go to number 2, which I think was, the subdivision. So this doesn't have to do with small lot standards, but it does. So I know we had a discussion today in our meeting with Clarion, and that's something that they're going to be talking about as far as the overall code update. But I wanted you to be aware of it as how it does impact the small lot development. So if you have these weird shaped lots and you want to combine something right now, you can. So I just wanted to get a feel from you on how you feel about administrative subdivision process. Again, it's not going to be with the small lot now. That would be coming later with the code update, but get a feel for it. So it helps us know how these small lots are going to be created, modified if we're doing, any type of 18 to 20 to 25 adjustments in the standards.
So this has come up a bunch of times peripherally, and I've always been a little bit confused by it. My understanding is that the majority of towns on our grid with the 25 by 100 foot lots, I know that there's outliers and some discrepancies there. But my input would be that if something's on the grid and already with conforming 25 by 100 platted lots, that I don't totally understand why there needs to be an administrative process to subdivide those. But anytime we have non-conforming, like if someone owns 6 lots and they want to sell off 2 of them and keep the other 4, I think that would fall within what we're talking about in terms of having an administrative subdivision process. But I don't totally understand why that would be needed, but I get it when it's like these weird shaped or width lots that aren't exactly on our grid.
It's more to do with when you're combining. So you have 2 25 by 100 foot lots and you want to combine them to create one 5,000 square foot lot. If you don't go through a subdivision process, you have a lot line running right down the middle of your lot. Just because you combined them under one ownership doesn't get rid of that lot line. So depending on how, who interprets it or what's going on, you could have a structure that crosses a lot line and then a title company come in later and be like, how the heck did this happen? You need to get rid of this lot line. It's not a clean title. So it really affects the property owners in the end. That's what I'm talking about. Or
but I guess, can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
But how? Because I feel like 90% of the homes in Silverton that are on
Have a lot
50 by 100 foot lots were never subdivided and have that lot line, and it hasn't seems like a problem.
I don't see what she's talking about here.
Yeah, I don't really like, so the Wyman, for example, or even Town Hall,
Or my
on
house.
4 lots.
Example.
So we've got multiple lot lines running through Town Hall. Like, how does that create a problem for the town and, getting a loan in the future or anything else?
Like I said, it depends. So I've run into it in my experience where some title companies make it an issue and then some don't. A lot of times it does have to do with your older platted town lots. A lot of times they will ignore those. But in some communities, title companies do throw a hissy about it. Like I said, through what I've been able to find here through interpretations, it's not an issue, but that lot line still is there. What I'm more talking about is if you buy this 5,000 square foot lot and you build your single family and then you have some room left over and the lot next to you is vacant, then you could combine those two and make another lot. And so instead of just buying it all, and now you have this 10,000 square foot lot and you're putting two houses, we're creating a process that you can administratively create these two divisions without having to go through a public hearing process. So helping facilitate the smaller width lots, like the 18 to 20. If you're keeping the 25 by 100, no, you don't have to do anything. But if you're looking to maybe adjust those a little, then yeah, you'd go through us so that we could look through, not us, but the town. You would go through the town so we can look at, number one, are you creating any non-conforming structures by adjusting this lot? Have you moved it too close to your house so now you don't meet the side yard setback?
So I would jump in with a piece of context and then an opinion. And the context is Silverton loves its grid. I've heard on lots of like the historic and character discussions about town that our grid and uniformity are part of the like village feel of Silverton, and that there seem to be a lot of people that care greatly about maintaining that type of uniformity. So if we started allowing people to break off like 20 and 30 foot chunks of a 5,000 square foot lot, we would lose that uniformity and kind of village feel. And maybe that's something we need public input on, but I've definitely heard that a number of times that like these kind of like 25 foot increments are pretty important to our historical feel. So that's the context. The input is that I don't think that these like internal lot lines have created any problems for us here or with the local title companies. And I would say unless we start to experience issues, it's probably not something we need to worry about very much. But anytime we do have weird shaped lots that already exist, we probably need a subdivision process to develop those.
Shay, I see you popped on. Do you have something to say on this? Shay is working with Clarion on the code update, and she was one we were talking about this today. Looks like she might be frozen. They were having internet issues in her town as well. Well, like I said, this is more of a land development code update issue. And so I just wanted to bring it up today to kind of give you an idea of how, if we're going to allow the 18-foot lots, then this is a process we'd probably need to implement. But if we want to stick with the 25-foot, it's not an issue. So just throwing that out there. But again, this is one that they're going to be handling, going through the stakeholder process, having this public input with more than just the board. So I think you'll get some guidance from the stakeholder group and from Clarion on this as we move forward through the land development code update.
Sheila, a quick question on that. So like if someone had 3 25-foot lots and they wanted to build on 2 of them a single family home per our typical lot size requirements, and then they wanted to sell off the other, if we allowed building on 25-foot lot and they wanted to sell off that third lot, is this where the subdivision process would come into play, or they really could sell that and someone else could build on it as long as we have it in our code that they could build on it?
As long as they haven't changed the legal description of that lot, then yeah, they can just sell it off as the 25 by 100.
Yeah.
The only
Right now, you wouldn't be able to build on that.
Right.
because
Yeah.
Unless it was
I
BTO.
heard that it's been, and I could be wrong, but Lucy, correct me if I'm wrong. If you combine it under those 3 25 by 100, it's now considered one parcel per the assessor. And then therefore, if they come in for a building permit, we look at it as one lot. But then if they go off and they try to sell that one off, it changes the dimensions on that existing structure. And then we don't have a chance to look to make sure they're not creating a non-conforming. It doesn't affect them until later if they're, if something happens to the structure. If it is a non-conformings aren't a really that bad of a thing. I mean, there are ways to work with it, but that's the only issue that comes up if they're selling off that third lot and they haven't built on it.
But I see the issue that potentially exists there where someone owns 3 lots, they build right onto the lot line of lot number 2.
Yeah, because they
And then
can't,
they
there's
sell
no
off,
setback there.
and they sell off lot number 3, but now no longer have a setback.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that create? I feel like that would just be a limitation on what could be developed on this
On
old lot. That would be
third.
like an easement almost.
Well,
Well,
what happens,
basically,
that third lot now has a structure that, let's say it's right on the property line. Now they are affected because now they have to be 10 feet away from it, unless they build a
Right.
firewall.
But that would have to be part of the disclosure when they sell the lot. So it doesn't really feel like a town issue.
And what I've heard from Kim, who goes through the process of changing the deeds, is that she tries to avoid creating non-conforming lots. And so if you had a house that was built on the lot line, that's a situation where it might be good to have the planning department in there and say, oh, this person's creating a non-conforming lot. Like, what is there, like a review process we can go through, or is this just not allowed at all? And that's part of this conversation as well, is figuring out how we're gonna adjust those setbacks. But that's an issue that will come up, and it's not a simple one. It's not like, oh, no, it's fine, you could just change the deed. It's like, well, now this is a non-conforming lot. And this person doesn't have doesn't have this side yard that, they should have if the setbacks were followed, and then they are gonna request a variance. And then we have to go to the Board of Justice, like,
Yeah.
My initial reaction is that isn't necessarily like a town. Like, I don't understand why the town needs to be part of the administrative process. It just creates a limitation on the remaining
buyer.
parcel that needs to be disclosed and recorded.
right, well,
Don't have the
it's
process for that.
because you're creating a non-conforming lot for that parcel.
Like, people should be allowed to do that. It just creates a future problem for a future limitation, not a problem.
well, one quick comment. Some of these, I'm not aware of any, but some of these could be homes that were 100 years old.
Right, that are
Like
on
I'm
the lot.
thinking about,
Before our zoning.
Yeah.
Our zoning came into effect, and so there's no setback requirements. They build on the line, and you've got 25 feet with a house
Yeah.
right there. I mean,
I wanna,
it's gonna, in my opinion, you guys want to do something where they're reviewed. Absolutely.
Bill,
Can't prevent somebody from selling it off to somebody who doesn't know better.
But that should be like something that should be part of your title search where it says like,
I agree with you.
you have
But
there's a 10-foot, like you can't develop the first 10 feet of your 25-foot parcel because of where this existing structure is.
And
Bill,
again, we are only looked to get involved if they're changing that legal description.
Hmm.
If it's still a 25 by 100 and they're selling it off, you can do that. I'm just saying, if they're looking to adjust that lot line to give their existing structure a setback and then sell it off, then that's when we would want to be involved in an administrative process to help them. And Shay is now here, so she might have something to interject because I know we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah,
and I think
thanks.
Liz has a comment here too.
yeah, Shay can go first.
Okay, thanks. Hey, so I'm just part of the consulting team, a sub to Clarion on the whole code update. And just wanted to share, I hear what you guys are saying, where it's kind of not the town's issue, but unfortunately it becomes the town's issue
That was a good way to end.
when someone comes to do very good due diligence when they are, oh, shoot. Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah.
We can, but maybe just. turn your
Okay,
video.
sorry, my internet has been awful today. It becomes the town issue because people come to town and they say, well, I bought this lot and I was allowed to buy it and now I can't build on it. And they get really upset with the town. So I see what you're saying. It could kind of be, you can be a little more proactive with it and try to set up these admin procedures that you hope are clean and easy and not a big deal, or deal with the issues when they come in later. I think it can be done kind of either way. I think we always try to promote a little bit more proactive just because then you avoid the people coming in being angry instead of like being just a little sad that they have to do process ahead of time.
Well, I very much appreciate this discussion. I was thinking that there were a lot of more straightforward aspects of this, but I'm seeing the complications. So thank you.
Well, and I think, oh, Liv, you had
Yeah,
a-
I wanted to ask Bill, because I'm struggling to envision exactly what this would be like, but I think my house might be something kind of similar. Like if I owned the lot next to my house and I wanted to push out a little bit past the lot line and then sell that lot, would that be this kind of situation?
Well, if you actually build on across the lot line, no, I mean, you can't really sell it. I mean,
Okay,
but if you're right up to the lot line.
like you know my house, like I'm right up against.
But you're also in the business.
oh, so the setbacks might be different.
Oh, okay.
But if you were in a different zone.
But if I were not in the business pedestrian zone and had that kind of situation, then that would be what we're discussing here. Thank you for clarifying.
I think I have two thoughts on the subdivision. I think I see value for the town and the planning department administratively to be involved at some point. I think I'd like to see that process be very straightforward, very streamlined and not onerous, like you've talked about, Sheila, because I think, again, the more barriers we throw in front of people, the more we make it harder to build. But I am thinking that we're probably going to run into two issues. Let's say we're going to run into issues where the structure has been there for a long time. And so if we start to say, okay, you can build on a 25-foot lot, and there's this 100-year-old house, this 100-year-old house has 5 lots, and they've built on 3 of them, and now they want to sell 2 of them, or it's 2 separate structures, but they're right. So we're going to run into it where the town would have never been involved in the subdivision process because the house was built 100 years ago. And then we'll have to think about what that looks like. But basically those lots that could be built on, the people have to know that, like, you're gonna have to have a 10-foot setback because the house you're building right next to is right on the lot line.
And again, we're only
yeah.
to get involved if they're adjusting it. I mean, we can do away with even looking at those that are just getting rid of an internal lot. We can do that, but it's mainly going to be if they're adjusting that lot line one way or the other to accommodate a smaller lot, or if they're to accommodate an existing structure so that they can sell off that other lot for development.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is going to all happen later, but I thank you for the direction because it helps us with knowing that we can or can't do the smaller lot like the 18 to 20 if we're looking at stuff like that. So the next one is the minimum lot size. Like originally it was like the 2,500, but then when we went out and looked, we saw there were a lot of lots. I think it was almost 1,400 lots that are less than 2,500 square feet. So again, you can get to a point where a lot is just simply not developable because it's too weirdly shaped, it's too small. Do you want to stick with the 2,500? Do you want to go down to 1,500? Do you want to establish it by use? You can do attached on 1,500. You have to do detached on 2,500. What are your general thoughts on that?
Were there typically similar reasons why the lots were less than 2,500 square feet?
They were 25 by 50, so they weren't 100 feet in width or length.
And what I was looking at I was looking at the map and not totally understanding where these parcels are.
Let me see if I can jump back
Are
up.
they kind of centered in certain areas where they're only 50 feet deep?
This is, okay, so this is the ones that are less than, some of them, they were narrower and then they were longer. He just did a full analysis based on the area of the lots in question.
And how'd they measure it? I mean, was this like, because I don't think we have that many lots that are platted less than.
It was based on the existing data from the assessor's office.
So that could be ownership.
So it's where like is it where streets or alleys have kind of been misplaced over a platted lot line, or?
No, it's ownership. They're using assessor's records, which show split ownership on properties, similar to mining claims. You have 10 people owning it,
Yeah.
but the actual plats are all 25 by 100.
Yeah, so I don't think this is as
Cannot,
significant
but-
as, I don't think this is as significant an issue as it appears. I think there's probably far less than 1,400 lots that are actually platted
Then
at 50 by 100 or 20 by 100 or if 25 by 50 or 20 by 100.
So do you want to stick with the 2,500 or do you want to allow it to come down or?
I'm not sure, just for the purpose of discussion, I don't think there's 1,400 lots that we have to worry about being non-conforming. I think it's probably a smaller number.
You got the information from the assessor's office?
Yeah, so my understanding from our GIS is that they pulled the existing information from the assessor's office, and these are lots that are do not have structures on them that are less than 2,500.
I don't understand
And if
that,
it's
but
helpful-
either way, regardless of the number of them, let's say there are 100 of them and not 1,400. What's the significant, like, either way, if there are fewer than 1,400, are you just saying this isn't worth making a decision
No,
about,
like
or?
if there were over 1,000 less than 2,500 square foot lots, then I would say we need to develop a less than 2,500 square foot
Right, because it's
lot rule.
significant.
But if there's like 1 to 200 and the ownership doesn't actually match the lot lines and,
Yeah.
and maybe like the ownership is just misleading,
Yeah,
then I would say stick to 2,500 square feet as our target minimum lot size, and then have some rules for variances where, like, if it's off by a little bit, it still fits. What do you think, Lucy?
I think part of the issue with this is that I actually noticed this a few months ago is single lots are rarely the exact size of 25 by 100. And that's just what happened when you develop a grid a really long time ago. And I don't think these are not a result of a subdivision or a boundary adjustment. These are, I think, mostly a result of just not being exact. And I think, I think it's something that we should consider, and we can just move past it if we need to, but we should consider that these lots, we have a code that says it has to be 5,000 square feet, and we're moving to a place where maybe we're gonna have a code that says that it has to be 2,500. But the reality is that we actually don't have a lot of lots that are exactly that. We have a lot of lots that are just slightly less than that. And maybe we just need that just needs to be addressed at some point.
The one solution that comes to mind is that we design around a target 2,500 square foot footprint, but we look at it more like from the inside out rather than outside in. So we say like what's the minimum width that's permitted and the maximum and minimum length that's permitted, and how far away do they need to be from the closest adjacent structure, so that if we have a bunch of lots that are 24 feet or 23 feet, they don't automatically become not buildable. It's just the size and location of the structure on it still meets all of our requirements for what we've targeted as a 20.
and then one non-conforming lot might have a little bit extra, whereas a different non-conforming lot has a little bit less, but the structure itself meets a
Still
specific
conform
standard.
with all of our standards.
Percentage of lot size per footprint.
Right, and then the feel of the area feels in line with what's around it too.
Sheila, is that something you've seen, or is that too hard to
So
consider?
it sounds like you guys are going back to what our original thought was, which is create standards. And if you meet them, you can build, but if you don't meet those, you can't. So if you're a 25-foot lot minimum and you're let's say 50 for the length, I'm just going to throw that out there, and you can meet the 5 foot all the way around, then
Right.
it can be built on. But if you don't meet that, then you'd have to go through a variance process to be able to put your structure there.
I would distinguish it slightly though, because the idea isn't to incentivize building on smaller lots or creating non-conforming lots that are less than 2,500 square feet, but it's allowing lots that may not conform today to still be developable. Like, we don't want to create
So you
non-conforming
start-
lots. We just don't want to limit development on some non-conforming lots. Does that
You
make
meet
sense?
these standards when you start with the non-conforming lot.
Yeah. I think so.
If you have a conforming lot, this doesn't apply.
Like, I think we would screw up town for a lot of people if we created rules that allowed people to create a bunch of like 18-foot lots, or like, you know, buying 3 lots, having like platted 75 by 100 and allowing them to break that into 4 parcels. I think that would be like a misuse of what we're trying to do here. But what we don't want to limit is someone building on like a 23 by 80-foot lot just because a bunch of 100-year-old structures happen to limit their lot size.
So something that is currently non-conforming versus something that is becoming non-conforming based on a current ownership decision.
So
I think
Can I just,
What I'm
Can I
hearing
just-
is you establish a minimum, for lack of a better term, based on existing. You can't go smaller, but if you have an existing lot, let's say that's 1,500 square feet, and you can meet standards, you can build on it. But if you have a 2,000 square foot lot and you want to sell off 500 and create your own 15-foot, we're not allowing that.
Correct.
yes.
Again,
can I
that-
just clarify something really quick? So, would you guys be in favor of this? If you had a parcel that was 3 lots and you were at a structure on 2 of those lots,
Mhm.
would you be in favor of allowing that 3rd lot to be sold off and developed?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
size.
As a 25 by 100.
As a conforming
Yes.
lot.
Yes, so, yeah, that is not as a future conforming lot. So in the future, that would become a conforming lot.
In the
It's-
future, it would be conforming, but it currently exists.
Yes.
As a non-conforming
Based on
Parcel.
code.
Yeah,
based on our code.
yeah.
I get it. I mean, this is happening down at the corner by.
It's also just like a language thing because
Yeah.
all of our parcels and our lots and is all confusing,
Yeah.
but yeah.
It's right now on R1A, it's 3 lot minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if this is gonna be open up to all the zones, which is your choice, of course, that means we could have a lot of 2 lot and 1 lot development up on the hill, which
And
is
there
negative. It's just something I want to point.
I'm just, yeah.
And
I
there will
would-
need to be discussion about whether or not we want to change R1A or if people like the historic significance of the R1A. And
Yeah.
if this is
Yeah.
this just R1 and R2.
Yeah.
That's a different
Yeah.
conversation.
So what I'm hearing is that 2,500 will be our standard minimum small lot. Anything less than that basically has to prove they were existing, and then we can set standards for them.
I like that.
Does that make sense to you, Sheila, based on what you've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, because you can easily write in that the lot has to have been created prior to whenever this ordinance is adopted. So it's official as of, if you had a 1,500 or an 800 square foot lot prior to when this ordinance was adopted,
It's not that
that's
many.
considered existing. Anything afterwards, you created new and it doesn't apply. The small lots don't apply to it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and just again, back to maximum square foot, minimum square foot. I think when we have the smaller lots and we make it possible for people to build on them, then we have smaller homes
That are potentially less expensive.
that are potentially less
Exactly.
expensive and fit with the character of the point.
I mean, that's.
And
real-
easier to heat and all the things. So yeah, when you ask the question, Lucy, like, would you be okay with this scenario of a home that's existing, it's on 2 lots, or it's on 3 lots, but the home is existing on 2 of the 3. And then they sell the 3rd, which would then be a 25 by 100,
Mhm.
which is currently non-conforming. It becomes conforming, and then a small structure can be built on that lot.
Mhm.
That sounds like that's the target.
Mhm.
Or if someone has a 5,000 square foot lot, they can put 2 separate units or connected if it's multifamily zoned. But that also, that if someone has a vacant, undeveloped 5,000 square foot lot, 2 structures could be put there.
Mhm. Yep.
Which again means that instead of 1 more expensive single family home, you're potentially getting 2 less expensive single family or townhouses.
Back to you, Sheila.
That works for me. So the next policy question is more just, I think, sticking with standard policy right now is that the town kind of takes on stormwater management and snow management, for lack of better terms. I mean, if someone's developing, we don't make them come up with a storm management plan or a snow management plan for a single family residential. So if we're going to stick with that, I just want to make sure we're not trying to add for extra considerations with the small lots. Just stick with status quo.
I would want to maybe explore what our options are. There are a lot of communities that allow smaller than 5,000 square foot residential developments that get as much snow as we do. And I'd just be curious to know what other communities do for snow management and infrastructure.
Okay.
And I also think like today, it's important to be forward looking here where like today, we don't as a town have capacity to manage increased snow management. But if we see more density, we have a lot more taxpayers and hopefully our income scales with our infrastructure needs.
Yeah.
My only concern I think status quo is somewhat problematic because we're just going to see, I've experienced this. Anytime we put a structure where there wasn't a structure, it changes water, it changes the flow, it creates problems for the downhill neighbors. And it would be great to, have a stormwater system that doesn't do that. But then requiring a full stormwater system drainage plan without any other additional infrastructure to sort of tie into or work with sounds incredibly expensive, increasing the price of development for an individual citizen. So
we had to do quite a bit of stormwater design and infrastructure for the property.
That's what I was gonna say, is like at a certain point, I wonder about how it scales up. So, at some point, if you're doing more than, I don't know what that threshold is, but I do think for an individual citizen developer, it creates a lot of expense and it doesn't necessarily set them up for success because they have no other structure in place to support that development. However, at a certain point, if you have, an entire swath of property that's being developed, it does seem prudent and potentially more efficient for the developer to come up with an overall plan. So I don't know how that really works here, but I don't necessarily think that the status quo will hold out for very much longer if we saw like just a lot of sudden development.
Well, it feels like we're in this growing pains period where we don't have enough residents to support greater stormwater management and public works infrastructure. And yet we also want to see more building and infill happening. And so I don't know. I kind of just feel like we have to work at it as we can because both things probably need to happen. Over the next 20 years, both things need to happen. Infill and development needs to happen and better stormwater management, increased public works infrastructure has to happen. So I don't know. Town, see, Gloria.
I think roof design and siting the houses on adjacent lots is critical. Because that's gonna dictate whether or not snow slotting right next to your neighbor. I think about Telluride that's got 3-foot setback in town. 6 feet between the homes, and that's a lot of snow dumping off. So there's gotta be a plan in place, but it can be, that can be resolved.
Well, because I feel like that's the argument we always hear from people. When I talk to people about single lot development, they say, oh yeah, great, but what about snow? Snow and sun. Snow and sun is what everybody brings up. And I don't know. Yeah.
And smaller homes would also not solve the problem by any means, but contribute to that. You have more yard area, you have more area for snow storage. If you have a smaller home on the back of the lot and then a smaller home in the front of the lot next to each other, they both get sun.
Yeah, and it's that whole pervious impervious type of ratio.
But
townhomes or duplexes designed with snow shedding.
Yeah.
But maybe if we're gonna allow people to develop on smaller lots, we need to develop small lot design standards that go beyond what our building codes are.
Yeah, what Bevan was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that a lot of homes in urban environments have flat or low pitch roofs. And, if you have a low pitch shed roof with, a rubber coating for roof surface, it's not dumping snow. It's holding it.
There's a reason why most of Green Street has flat roofs. And if you look at a lot of the modern building in high-end Utah neighborhoods, they're all, even the single-family homes are built flat roofs, so there's no snow shedding issues. They're just built to actually.
Yeah, there's
They hold it.
engineering.
Yeah.
That's
I think we
what-
should limit ourselves. I think we can be creative, and snow shedding is not the reason to not do this.
Couple things to keep in mind, water management or waste or drain water management up there is always gonna be surface.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can ever be put underground that we could afford. And anybody in this room could live here while it was being afforded. That's out of the question. It's gonna be on surface because everything else freezes. We got 2 culverts. We can't barely keep who we currently have open, let alone number one. Number two, to haul snow like we're talking about needing to be done, you're talking about an increase of at least 2 men, 2 more pieces of heavy equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all they do during all the plowing that we all know takes place. Is these people are out just hauling snow during the plowing, and that's how the larger is accomplishing. And that is, like you said, that it's the cart and the horse, the cart and the horse.
Yeah.
Come up with the extra 200,000, 300,000, do that.
And Sheila, you might already have this kind of like earmarked on the same issue, but parking or like rules about parking on people's property or incentivizing garage, like there's very few, something that I was the most surprised by when I moved here is how few garages we have. Like for such a harsh environment where people have so many toys, we have like so few garages. But right now we manage snow removal by having alternate side parking in the winter, but if we double our number of cars, then we can't actually alternate side park, which means we can't remove snow. So we do need to anticipate that as well.
So we could take garages out of the maximum square footage. We could increase height so that we could kind of make it more compact and get those off. But yeah, we did talk about parking, keeping it on the street, getting it off and putting it on the private property. Yeah.
Yeah. A quick note on height, just because it's come up twice, but I got an unsolicited call right after I was elected from former mayor of Aspen, who said his biggest regret in his 2 terms was for a brief period of time removing height restrictions in Aspen, and a bunch of buildings went up that were taller, and the whole community pretty much decided that ruined the entire feel of the community. So I do think that being very intentional with any changes to our height is something we need to.
30-foot height allows you to have a full basement. And if you have like an 800 square foot maximum, that's a 1,600 square foot house. And it depends what you want for a theme of our community. But on 2,500 square feet, a 1,600 square foot house, 2 stories, right? Keeps it within the theme of the value of that property and the value of that home that's on that property. Yeah, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot and you want to build 2,500 square feet, that's a different theory.
So, but then your options, like we were talking about garages, if you're doing garage, you couldn't do garage 2 stories on top, right? It'd be garage 1 story on top.
It's on your roof line.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
also depends on you.
And your incline.
Big
Big.
and
Yeah.
put the garage,
In-
partially underground.
Yeah.
And in cases where you're on a hillside, like near you,
Walk out.
you could easily do a walkout basement,
Garage. Yeah.
So, and integrate and still keep the height within the code
Yeah.
restrictions.
You can build 3 stories in 30 feet.
Yeah.
So garage could be on the first floor.
And if you're doing a shed roof too, it's not, you can lower that height.
Yeah.
You can have taller interior ceiling height
That's why.
and a lower
Roof
line.
Yeah.
So kind of get best of both worlds.
You want
Jim's
to,
being really attentive. Jim, we haven't given you a chance to say anything.
Up, Jim.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sheila, this is one of the better packets I've seen, and the maps that you provided are absolutely incredible and have made this task a lot easier for all of us to look through. A lot of what you've brought forth in the packet and a lot of what we've discussed already were some of my points here on my pad that I've already written notes down when I saw the packet a few days ago. We are experiencing growth. This is going to be a double-edged sword for all of us, because as much as we want to do this and we want to pack people in and sell little parcels and get people affordability, housing, and lots, and create that affordability. We got to look at the infrastructure. This is a monumental task. Shane, one of the things that Shane had said was about parking. Parking is going to be an issue. Snow load's an issue, and we've mentioned snow load for the past 3.5 years when approaching this issue. So I look forward to this to the continuation of this discussion and also future discussions, because clearly I'm not the smartest person and I don't have the answer. But I think that with all of us together, we can come up with really good solutions.
Thanks. Well, I know we only have 8 minutes left, so I want to jump to 2 issues I'd like to get final guidance on. One is specifying if we're going to move forward with doing the small lot development standards ahead of the code, I'd really recommend we stick with 1 or 2 zone districts, try it out, and then as we're moving through, we implement it. But if we're okay with just continuing this dialogue and implementing it with the code update and doing it all at once, that's my number 1 recommendation. I'm a planner, I got to do it. But number 2 is if we are going to do a separate code and try to, implement it. I know the question earlier was, if let's say we could get it adopted by January, which, maybe we can or can't. But if we did, do we really see anything happening in the next 6 months that would really utilize this? And since I've been here and I haven't been here as long, I would really defer to Lucy. I haven't seen anyone really come in with these small lots, but Lucy, I mean, you've been there, you have the experience. What are your thoughts?
I think that because it's not allowed, we don't see it a ton. I've had in my time 3 people ask me about it. But I think it's on people's minds for sure. And I think I've been talking to people looking at property, and that is something that they've asked me about. Is that going to happen? Should I invest in this property if there's potential for me to add more density? And so I think the demand is there for sure. And that just makes me want to get it right. So
does that mean go slow to go fast, or does that mean go fast to go slow? Like, does that mean implement it sooner and you think there would be a few people taking advantage of it over the next building season? Or would you say, let's keep having these intentional discussions and wrap it into code rewrite and then let people have at it and promote it?
I am gonna agree with Sheila. I think that I think the best way to get it right the fastest is to do it through the code rewrite. So we can address all of these little things we talked about. But I also think it's possible to do it sooner and to use those hiccups as we do the code rewrite, if that's what you all want. But I think we're doing this code rewrite right now.
And that's why we bring them into when we were having this discussion, is whatever I write affects what they're going to do and vice versa. And that was the kind of the questions of, are you incorporating the minor subdivision? We might be. And so it is all kind of tied together. But again, if we do move forward, I would say pick 1 zone district. Let's really target that one, see what we get. And Lucy, you may know which of those, in those 3 questions, which zone district it was. But if you could stick with the R1, that seems to be the easiest. We can do some standards there and see how they go. But if you're getting most of the inquiries in the ED, then that's when we need to look at the whole mixed use incentives and stuff like that too.
I'm more conflicted today than I was a week ago.
Yeah.
This definitely educated me a lot, so I appreciate that. My pitch for moving faster is the build timeline for the larger lots in town, or the larger potential developments in town, is probably like 2+ years. And if people today are planning developments, like at some point Jim Loki's land's going to sell, and that's going to be a subdivision. I'm working on stuff at the south end of town that would be impacted by this. in terms of like the density that's built.
Mhm.
There's at least one other meaningfully sized development that's been proposed that didn't work out because of wetland stuff right now. But like people are planning these things so far in advance, and it's the largest swaths of land left to build that I think the sooner we can at
Give
least like,
clarity.
and we don't necessarily need to adopt it, but like very strongly signal that this is coming, then people can actually spend the money to plan for the higher density. But if we don't do that really soon, then people are just going to move ahead with these like lower density plans.
Mhm.
And then once that land is developed, it's forever to like, based on what land costs are today and build costs are today, like we're not going to see developers coming in another like 8 years and tearing stuff down and building new stuff at higher density.
Yeah.
Like what we build will be here for our lifetimes. So
So would the goal be to just, best case is kind of in between, like you said, is maybe draft some regulations that you're looking at that gives people an idea, but maybe they don't actually get adopted until the code is done, but people see them coming like the rest of the code.
right, but I also now really appreciate all of the complexities and the kind of like trickle down of issues created by allowing smaller lot development without having everything fit together nicely.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think if there's some type of middle ground where we could, you know, say that we've gone ahead and approved building on smaller lots, but we can't actually accept applications on building on those lots until all of the rest of the code rewrite is completed. I think that would be an interesting
Mhm.
middle ground.
Like a way to signal it for planning, even if it's not adopted yet. I know we have 2 minutes. We have a variety of participants on. Are we open to any public comment? I know we have one local builder online. Are
With his
we,
hand raised.
how does the board feel about having any public input at this juncture?
I also think we could start the next one like 2 to 3 minutes late. Yeah.
Are you guys open to having public?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Nico, if you unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. First, I just want to say, I think this is an awesome discussion. You guys are really on the right track, and I'm glad you're having it. Like somebody said there, I'm a local builder, and I just wanted to touch on a few things really quickly. The first is snow retention. I've installed quite a number of very robust snow retention on roofs in Silverton, with great success. Even last winter with that fairly large winter, I didn't have any of my roofs slide, even with a 912 pitch. So that's one thing to consider if when you're talking about these small lots and gable in roofs. Number two is, you know, I've literally built houses that are 8 feet wide, 10 feet wide. I've lived in a house that was 16 feet wide, and I'm currently living in a house that's 20 feet wide. So, if someone wants to build a small house, and do it professionally and do it well, I think they should be able to do it. So I think creativity really, really could go a long way for, you know, just creating solutions, for this infill. And then the third thing is going back to Liv's question about her property. I think the answer could be yes to her question. I think that those are the kind of situations that would encourage people to kind of say, wow, the town really is open to this small house thing. They are open to these small lots. You know, Liv wants to bump out. Maybe she wants like a sunroom or a breakfast nook. You know, she wants 5 feet. So then maybe that makes the next lot 20 feet. Well, why can't she subdivide that and make that a 20-foot lot? And then, you know, 5 foot all the way around. Okay, you got 10 feet to build your house. Build a 10-foot wide house, you know, that would be that, just some things to think about. Thank you so much for having this. And, that's all I have.
Thanks, Nico.
All right.
Well, what I'll do is I'll move forward. I'll try to do a summary, and then meet with staff and with Clarion, and we'll come up with maybe some guidance and have, send you back a memo kind of summary of everything we talked about, some where I think the direction is going and what some next steps might be.
And a quick reminder, we will be having the first kind of hunk or the first draft of the new code available to the public in early February. So we might be able to achieve that, you know, that we're serious about changing small and having smaller lots and allowing for those with that draft. So just wanted to throw that out, that is coming soon. That first hunk of information that you guys will get includes the zoning districts and uses, but does not yet, I think, include the site dimensional stuff. I'll have to check on that, but we'll see how we can incorporate that, of course, with our project.
All right, any more questions? Feel free to email me, call me, whatever, and I can see if it, and I will look into further the whole like lot issues and see what I can find out on those the sizes and where we got those numbers, so I can get you that information too.
And Shayla, this is so great and thorough, and Lucy for your input. I just really appreciate that we're having this discussion, because then as we go into the code review, I mean, I don't feel like this information is lost, right? Like, it's important we're getting ahead of the curve, because I think this is the direction we want to go in, and there are a lot of questions we have to answer related to it. So I appreciate your work, and I think it's time well spent, personally.
I agree. I think a lot of this discussion can carry over to the overall code update. I'm glad Shay could be here to hear it too. All right, well, I'm gonna head out. You guys have fun at your next meeting.
Thank you very much. This is great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, guys.
Evan and Bill, I'm glad you guys are here.
Yeah, 5 minutes, yeah. Thank you.
And both singles and
All right.
All right, good evening.
Night.
Welcome to a special meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Today is Monday, December 4th, the time 6:42 p.m. And I call this meeting to order. I think we do for special meetings, do roll call. So roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards,
Here.
trustee Cranker,
Here.
trustee Harper,
Here,
Okay. Sorry, Jim. I think your microphone did something really funny there.
here,
Okay, excellent. Perfect. Thank you.
trustee Thurman is absent, trustee George,
The kids would die.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here.
All right, thank you. We are going to leave our video off for a second since we are presenting and eating at the same time. So tonight we're here to talk about our water and sewer fund. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background. I have been frantically trying to figure out better solutions. So the board packet memo that you have has been amended, and I will send that update to you after this presentation, but I've updated the presentation so you guys have a visual of the numbers. Okay, so our water fund now is projected to spend down its fund balance in 2024 to a negative 29,249. So this is adjusted from your packet. I had a meeting with our accountant today and she adjusted the ending fund balance. That will come into play here later on in the presentation. And the sewer fund is projected to spend down its fund balance this year by 26,000 and then next year by 66. So a negative of both of those is a $93,000 negative, basically. These numbers have adjusted slightly, but this is the most current. The issue is we cannot adopt a negative budget for 2024. And why is this urgent right now is because I have been waiting for the rate study to be complete in order to complete the water and sewer budgets. Now, I found out about 3 weeks ago that they will not be complete, that our rate study will not be complete in time. Now, this rate study is a little bit more intensive than what we did in 2017. We were looking at capital assets. It's a lot more involved than what I know happened in 2017. So it's going to take a little longer, but I think we're going to get a much better product. In the interim, we need to address the fact that we're going to have a negative fund balance going into 2024, and we cannot budget for that. So that is why the special meeting was called, so that we can address that right away and adopt a positive fund balance. So in doing some digging, we found that in 2017, a resolution, and so this is right after the rate study, a resolution was passed and signed adjusting the water and sewer rates, increasing the water and sewer rates. These rates were never put into our system. So essentially we have not raised our rates in over 10 years at this point.
Even though we have a resolution
Raising the rates.
raising the rate.
Even though we have an adopted resolution raising the rates in 2017. Did the math for the last 6 years. These funds have seen an estimate cumulative loss of $738,154 in the water fund and a loss of $166,205 in the sewer fund by not implementing that 2017 resolution. Great. That's what brings us to where we're at today.
That's the cost of not having implemented this in 2017.
Correct. Correct. So that would have been over 6 years. I have a little table up there on kind of how I calculated how many accounts we would have and what it would do. So it's an estimate cost, but basically that's the revenue we lost by not I wouldn't even say adopting that resolution because we adopted it. It was implementing it. Okay, so in speaking with my accountant today, we went back through the water and sewer funds beginning and ending fund balances. And what she explained to me, and this is different from our previous accountant. So we just got a new accountant about 2 months ago. And the accountant provides us with our ending fund balances. Now, ideally, your beginning fund balance of your previous year or your ending fund balance of your previous year should match your beginning fund balance of the next year. Right? Because you just, that should carry over. And in some of these cases, that is the case, and it's not always the case. And so just recently, when I was talking with the accountant, she informed me as we looked back through our 2022 audit, our ending fund balance for the water fund was actually 429,000 in 2022. So we're actually looking better than what I projected in the memo that went out in the packet.
Yeah.
These other ones, I'm still investigating why, but I'm assuming some of these are an accounting error and then redone. But it is concerning, as you can see, like this one had 598,000, and then all of a sudden we're at 180. And so it's a little different for these two enterprise funds. They don't exactly have an ending fund balance. So we're saying this is beginning of funds available and ending funds available. Because you calculate the assets that you have in the fund balance or in the fund as well as the cash. So there's the assets and then the cash, and then you have to kind of separate out the liabilities from that. So it's a little bit more complicated on how you get these ending balances, basically. Probably too much information.
Possible that in some of those larger numbers regarding beginning fund balance, that there was a transition of sorts and like an asset didn't get calculated in a standard way.
Yeah.
But the accounting was off,
it's
not
not
that
like
there's funds.
Right. No, this would just, I mean, I wouldn't say there's any cash going anywhere. I would say that this is that, like, just some accounting.
Lack of understanding about how those assets need to be accounted for.
Correct.
And balance.
Correct. So this is something we're working through, and honestly, our new budgeting software should fix this completely, which I'm really excited about because this came through as an Excel spreadsheet. That's what I was nervous about, is that some things didn't match up, and moving forward, it will be tracked a lot more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So a little fun, I want to give you a little highlight on what an enterprise fund is now that we've kind of talked through the ending funds available. So water and sewer are enterprise funds. And this is a separate accounting and financial reporting mechanism from our general fund. And through that, we have direct costs and indirect costs. So our direct costs include our permits, supplies, engineering, fuel, utility. This all you can see when you open up that budget and you see water fund, you're going to see the direct costs associated with that fund. The indirect costs, the personnel, the billing, the equipment, the office space, the legal, the insurance, and the financial administration are all in our general fund. And so we charge, and I know you guys have seen this, but I'm kind of giving a bigger explanation. So we charge our general fund for these indirect costs, and that's what we call administration fees. So some people think, oh, administration fees, you're just charging for personnel. No, it includes everything from legal to insurance to audit, all of that.
Right, so those enterprise funds pay a portion of the cost for operating them.
The admin funds, yeah. the admin fees. And then there's another component to enterprise funds that Tabor likes to throw in. And so it says that if you have to make a fund transfer of more than 10% of the enterprise fund's revenue from the general fund, then you are no longer considered an enterprise fund. This is key because you cannot, if enterprise funds violates this 10%, all potential debt will need to go to a vote. So this would affect our ability to accept a USDA loan. So
Is the intent here that these funds are relatively, that the revenue from the funds largely pay the cost, except for
It's sustaining.
like, it's sustaining. I mean, charging rates that are in line with what it costs to administer those services.
correct.
How much,
So if you're transferring from the general fund, clearly then those those services are not being covered.
how much has the cost of our services increased over the last years?
Sure. So let's talk to that. So let's talk about the administration fees, those indirect costs that we charge, that we pay the general fund to use those indirect costs. So this up here is how the administrative fees have been calculated since Mark Garcia put this into place. And I don't know what year he was here, but I have talked to him about these administration fees. And as you can see, there's a percentage of staff time of general services that go towards water, sewer, refuse. So I can walk you through this. If we start at the staff to be allocated, we take that total number and we put it over to the right-hand side of water, sewer, trash. And then we take the general services below the staff to be allocated and we separate it out, take that number over to the general services, and then we plop all that into the total allocations. And you can see for each fund, water pays $423,248 in administration fees.
That's the combination of the two A's.
Yeah, that's the combination of the two A's. So you can kind of walk through it that way for each one. John and I have talked about these administration fees and we don't think they serve us probably like they did in the past. So we don't see a parks and facilities justifying 25% of that cost. We just don't see that. And you can see this is a huge line item that gets added into the general fund. So this is $792,000 that gets added into the general fund. So sometimes people might use this or might abuse it and use it to supplement a lot of their general fund. So that's been one of the arguments. So we would like to tighten this down at some point and make it more accurate on what the general fund actually supplies these enterprise funds. And there is an option for that. And we want to address that. I was waiting for the rate study to do that because they really do help with these type of calculations.
Because the rate study would help give us more accurate information on which departments support these funds at which levels.
Correct.
Okay.
Or the costs of the funds.
Yes, and but we can adjust these. So I didn't think we could without a rate study, but after talking to my accountant today, she said, yes, you can adjust these as long as it's reasonable. So if you don't think that charging events and communications to these two funds is reasonable, then you can take that out.
And so why would you be doing that? Other than accuracy or,
To reduce the fees, as you can see on the sides, we have sewer fee funds on the admin or both sides. I put water fund on one side and sewer fund on the other side. And as you can see, these fees have gone up.
Yep.
exponentially over the years because we
As
haven't
this-
increased our general fund budget.
Yeah, so it's proportional.
So
Like,
that we don't have to necessarily adopt, so we're not in the negative budget adoption mode.
right, if we decrease the admin fee that we're charging to those
Yeah.
funds, then we deplete those funds less.
Uh-huh.
Right.
What was it? Who was?
Right, but we don't get that income into the general fund. So keep that in mind as you.
Right, like it increases the enterprise funds, but it decreases the general fund.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I think Tyler might have a comment.
Oh, Tyler?
Well, and we had mentioned this before, but when we're just using a flat percentage of whatever the salary is for the administrator, clerk, planner, et cetera, those numbers have gone up, but that doesn't mean that the work going towards these funds has also gone up like the same amount. So, and I believe that's been mentioned in the past, but you know, as salaries go up, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the same amount of time being spent on these funds. So that's probably no longer accurate.
And I would argue that that's the cost of doing business. Like it will go, like our salaries will increase. Inflation will increase.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So all of this will increase, but is it still relevant to have parks and facilities allocated at 25%?
Right.
Is it
Right.
still relevant to have the bond principal, which carries our bond for Columbine Park, included in this as well, paying towards? So those are some things to consider. Right. Going to go to our next slide. Okay, so this is the first one. So you had 4 options in your packet.
Right. Option one, I'm getting a message.
Can we pause for a second? So I feel like we're talking about the nuts and bolts of how these funds work, and then being asked to make a decision about how to like what to do to balance the funds, which is going to potentially have a meaningful impact on residents. But we haven't talked about policy at all. So I think it'd be helpful to like zoom out and have a policy discussion around what our goals are to help direct us on how to make the nuts and bolts decisions.
Okay.
So for example, to the extent we can move those admin budgets around to other places would be, for me, directed by whether our policy decision was to try to keep our costs to residents as low as possible, or if we're comfortable increasing those costs. Like, what's the cost of living here? Is it already too high? Do we need to be seeking alternative means for?
I do appreciate that conversation and I would love that conversation, but I would love to present you with pretty much the only options we have first, and then you can evaluate them based on
Priorities.
Unless you want to have that conversation now, but I think some of the things that I'm going to tell you might negate a lot of your options.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That's fine. I don't know if they negate our long-term options. They just negate our immediate options.
Immediate options, yeah. Yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So you had option 1 in your packet. After discussing option 1 with the accountant, she said, absolutely not, you cannot do that. So we are not going to present on option 1. You had option 3 in your packet. After presenting option 3 to our accountant, she said, absolutely not, you cannot do that. You had option 4. She recommended not doing option 4. And option 4 was increasing the rates to cover the full deficit, but without knowing what our new rate study will come out as, she recommended not doing that, because we could be unnecessarily increasing rates. So she recommended not doing that. So that leaves us with option 2, and then I have an option 2A and an option 2B. So these options and I just want to put these out there, and feel free to interject if you want to talk about the policy as we go through this, but I just wanted to give you this framework first. So option 2 is to activate the 2017 rates for 2024. That would start immediately. This was highly recommended by our accountant to activate those 2017 rates. Then we could potentially budget for a transfer to the sewer fund to cover that. If we activate the 2017 rates, water fund will be sustainable in 2024. This
Without doing a transfer.
right.
We'd have to transfer
To that one, we would only transfer to sewer for this one. Now, 74,000 is still larger than that $27,000 dollar limit, which is the 10% of our revenue. Not a great option. Option 2A is activate the 2017 rates for 2024 and look at adjusting admin fees to reduce the percentage from parks and facilities and events and communications. Water fund will still be sustainable for 2024. I did put like what it would do to our utility rates over here, for anyone that's wanting to see that, but I do have a summary sheet after that you guys can use for discussion.
Wait, what is, okay, keep going.
Yeah. Option 2B is to activate the 2017 rates for 2024 and increase the sewer rates to cover the full deficit of the $96.79 billing cycle. Water would be sustainable for 2024. We are increasing sewer rates more than the 2017 rates. But at the current rate, even with the capital improvements line item on top of that, we are still just breaking even. And this is a summary of those options.
But couldn't 2B include adjusting the administrative rates too?
Yes, we could adjust this administrative rates too, but if we are covering our deficit, I would say wait until the rate study comes out.
Yeah.
Do we know what our like per household costs are compared to other regional communities?
Not off the top of my head.
I think that with any of these options, there's going to be some upset people, and that it'd be interesting to know what our per household costs are compared to like Ridgeway and Uray and Salida and Buena Vista. And I know there's nothing we can do.
I mean, yeah.
There's nothing we can do about it in the short term. There's certainly things we could do about it in a year or 2 years to subsidize those costs.
I think a concern that I have is raising rates twice. Like, if it's inevitable that rates have to be raised, I think it's super painful for everybody to do it twice. And we'll get, I mean, raising rates regardless will create a lot of feedback. And then if you do it twice, it's that much more doubly challenging. And so I'm just a little concerned about raising them and then having a rate study that comes back and says, we need to raise them more.
We will likely have to raise them for the next 5 years. They should always be incrementally raised with inflation, and we haven't done that at all.
And we're
I mean,
sitting here.
it's going to be something we'll have to budget for. Hopefully the rate study comes back and says, you know, you can raise it incrementally. You're close, but you got to raise it incrementally over the next 5 to 10 years.
I'd like to offer an alternative opinion, which is that the longer any family can hold on to a couple dollars, the better. So like, even though administratively or mentally, like seeing your rates go up over and over and over sucks, like keeping your rate as low as possible for as long as possible is better for families.
Well, and just an
In my mind.
incremental, I actually had kind of a different thought on that too, Dana. I do appreciate, I think the idea of just like, oh, we hate to do this over and over. I see where you're coming from. I also think just to have some time to adjust incrementally is, I mean, for me, it sounds better than taking it all at once and being like, whoa, we just went instead of a, $20 increase. Now it's just like suddenly a 50. That's just so significant.
I think
Well, but
if it's like significant incrementally, right? Like if it's a little bit over time, but if it's like a lot, I mean, considering that those 2017 rates were not implemented and now we're talking about like a $700,000 deficit is very.
that's the biggest thing right now is I think just making sure that we explain that, this should have been happening and it wasn't. And the fact that it wasn't implemented in 2017 is, why we're here. And so, communicating that to everybody in town and saying, well, yeah, we're going to see this increase. And then in future, we should be seeing this every year. And it's just something that it wasn't done. And we just really going to need to explain that even though it was a resolution that was signed and passed and ready to go, it wasn't implemented. And that's why we are where we are.
I think the relative cost to other communities is really important. Like if we find out that we're like outside the zone of reasonable cost compared to other communities relative to similar infrastructure, then we have a lot more work to do to figure out how to bring our cost of living aligned with other regional communities. But like this is a place where we have one paved road, facilities are overhead. There's just so much infrastructure we don't have. Our trash service, the staff is great, but the overall scope of like the facility and the services provided are limited.
But in any other comparison community, you have economies of scale.
Yeah.
Everyone else is
There's a lot of
double.
other small places.
So your Ray, Melina just pulled up your Ray. And they're $165 per month. So that's $330.
And that's why I'm saying the comparative is important, because if you tell us that we're 50% below or 30% below neighboring,
Talking point.
then being like, okay, we're going up $70. Like that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's like, it's still more affordable per household than all of the neighboring communities.
And recognizing
That's
that we're half the size of some of those places and we have base infrastructure that you have to support, whether you have 250 people here, or whether we have 1,000 people here. That's the painful part of it. That's why we need.
But there's also, but like, I think that these conversations are really important in how we make other policy decisions. And that's why I went back to policy, because I think about like, for example, one of the reasons that we pay for outsized infrastructures as residents is because we have an economy that is largely driven by tourism. And so that tourism means that we need larger infrastructure than our residents need.
Yeah.
But that, if our costs become too high as a cost of living perspective, like maybe our tourism-based taxes need to go towards this type of stuff and not towards marketing. And another thing, like maybe all of the like hotel taxes, that the $2 per night bed tax and other stuff, like all those need to get like directed to other places. And maybe the long-term solution is pulling the admin costs out of here into the general fund and then redirecting like a lot of our tourism income.
Well, we have to charge an admin fee. And that is like, there's a lot there that I want to unpack, but we have to charge an admin fee. We cannot put taxes towards this. We would have to just put fees towards it. So any kind of fee would be associated with it. It's pretty nuanced in CRS on how the enterprise fund has to be managed. And the real concern here is that if we can't not do anything is the thing at this point. We have to do something.
And we have the pressure of a budget adoption.
Yeah. But I think those are really valid points, Shane, and to consider, like all those things are true at the same time.
I mean, I'm conflicted even saying this, but like, I'm looking at the Highlander utility bill and it's marginally higher than my home bill. and there's 10 residential units there. How many other apartments in Silverton are being similarly charged? And wouldn't it make more sense for all of those apartments to pay similar fees to houses rather than seeing an across the board increase?
And I think we're gonna see that in our rate study.
Okay.
Because it is a lot more extensive than the last one that was done. But at this point, these are the options that the accountant has come up with for us to fix and remedy this situation. Now, if we wanted to create like a whole program, I would say, stop, let's wait until the rate study. Like, I would not feel comfortable creating that program without that information.
So you're looking at some of the decisions that we need to make regarding rates for water and sewer on a timeline, where we have an immediate decision that we need to make tonight because we have a budget to adopt in the month of December.
Right.
And beyond that, once we receive information from a rate study.
That's where I would love those policies.
That's where we have another work session and we look at the policy side and the longer term effects on the community and the neighboring communities. And we try to figure out a more nuanced approach to rates.
Yeah.
So what do you need from us tonight?
I agree that like the line of talking that I'm doing isn't necessarily applicable to decisions tonight.
Mhm.
I feel like if we just were like, okay, so it is, let's go up $70 a night, like at $70 a month for
Yeah, yeah.
everybody, like we would all get run out of town.
Well,
Like, I
where
think
is
it's
this headed
important that
with-
we be thinking about all of this stuff.
It's,
Yeah, I understand.
I totally get that.
I'm just trying to keep.
I'm 100%.
Oh, that's a great one. I'm gonna bring you back.
Well, okay, so where I was headed with that is that tonight, what we need to do is create an account that will simply pass our budget, which is what we have to legally, which is our most immediate legal responsibility. From what I can tell, when we look at the increases, oh, now I lost which one I was calculating. If we look at like what this actually means for families, and I think we need to clarify what we're doing. When we are billed in Silverton, we're billed bi-monthly.
Yeah, you're billed for 2 months.
So when we're comparing like monthly amounts, we need to realize that our bills reflect a bi-monthly.
Mhm.
And why do we do bi-monthly instead of monthly? Is it just administratively easier?
And why don't we,
Why do we have
government resolutions that we pass?
Monthly, but apparently at some point in the past, we tried to switch that over to monthly. It did not go well. To bi-monthly.
Do we find out at some point in the next year
As
how many
exactly why?
these are bi-monthly? No, not even why, just
Yeah, just how many are bi-monthly.
normal, or is this?
Yeah.
A natural point for that would probably be like beyond the rate study as we look at how this works going forward. And the idea of like, how does this look for apartment units? How does this look for? I mean, we hit a wall with this previously when we were talking about waste collection and commercial use versus residential use. So we know that those are some issues that need to be addressed.
Before
But-
anybody gets upset that I don't pay my fair share, my ADU is separately identified for some reason. So I pay whatever, like double
Double for the ADU,
for my
yeah.
house and ADU. So
It's all of these things. We're implementing integrity, organizational integrity.
That's important to note, actually. I mean, those are all going to be details I think that we need to come back to when we look at this.
Well, and it came up in a finance committee meeting about rates for tiny homes and how do we create incentives for smaller development? Could you reduce some of those fees? So that's a whole larger policy discussion, but I appreciate what Sally is leading to here as well.
I support option 2A. It's the least amount of increase that we're allowed to implement that balances the budget and it's still Tabor compliant.
Yeah, I
So
think it's
I-
important
and
to
I
stay
also want-
Tabor compliant.
Say that again, Taylor?
I said, I think it's important to stay Tabor compliant.
It is.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I support whatever's the least financial impact on individuals, which is 2A.
Jim gives it a thumbs up. I like 2A because I also like reducing the admin fees personally. It doesn't help our general fund, but I think it just sits better in how we think about our funding and our staffing. And I just think it's easier to articulate to the community as well.
I agree with that.
And this will have implications on our general fund. I just had the meeting with the accountant an hour before this meeting, so I didn't have time to do that full calculation, but I would try to make it so that the sewer fund would balance, basically, is where we would be at. If I took away the parks and rec, that would, and the Anisi, I did some preliminary stuff here. I had it there. Removing Parks and Rec and Benson Communication and taking it out of Anisi Park, that would reduce the general fund admin fees by $136,000. So that might be a big chunk in our ending fund balance, but
So for families, currently, we're paying $213.43 every 2 months. That is about $106 a month, monthly. With option 2A, that goes to about 250, I think, bi-monthly, which would mean 125. So
it's about $223 a year increase for a family or for an individual or a business, because we don't differentiate at this difference.
But our water usage for commercial often is over the minimum amount, so commercial does end up paying more for water. Sewer is the only one that ends up pretty much being static for everybody. Because also trash is a lot higher than commercial as well.
Yeah.
I'll have a whole
You're off mute.
trash for you next.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about trash right now.
Just wait until January.
Jim's unmuted.
So the annual increase is a little over $18.50 a month.
More than
it'll be about $19 a month.
Here, let's go back to this.
So
Annually,
223 divided by, that's the increase, correct? That's what I heard.
And you guys said 2B, right? No, that was 2A.
Oh, I was calculating on A. 2A.
the 224.84 divided by 12.
So it's an increase of $37 a billing cycle.
Like $14 a month.
So sorry, Jim, yes, you were right.
Yeah, $14 a month.
And I agree with everyone. Making this
How much?
understanding household budgets, and we all have them, and we all want to live with them, and knowing that a huge rate increase that's beyond our control is going to hit everybody in the pocketbooks, doing what we can to make it more palatable and easier to absorb that into our monthly budgets, to me, is top priority. I understand that it's needed, and I said that earlier today. I understand the necessity for doing this. But looking back on a personal experience, back in 2011, 2012, down in La Plata County, the rates went from $18 a month to $93 a month. And it just happened. And a lot of people were upset and seeing that huge jump. But if it was done in increments and communication, like Tyler was saying, was there and more readily available, I think people are more understanding, and obviously our friends and neighbors are more understanding and better prepared to absorb those monthly costs. That is my number one priority. Oh. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
It also just seems like an easier sell or communication point to say we're implementing the rates that we already have a resolution for from 2017. And That's just easier to go with.
It's a pretty big oopsie.
A lot of money. Talk about an
Lori said
opportunity
no
cost.
comment. So what else are we doing then in
But you
6
know what,
years? we're
that,
gonna wish
that
we did
really
differently?
indicates how much you can save if you start early and young and you let it go over time. Lesson learned.
6 years.
Is there any other discussion or direction that's helpful other than a motion to adopt 2A if the board is all kind of heading that direction?
No, and I appreciate that. I think that is a great option. It will reduce our general fund over, you know, I have to do the final calculations, but we won't make our full amount for our reserve funds, but I know that this is going toward something that, like, this is not an option, basically. I would call this a good use of reserve funds because it's such an immediate need. That this is probably the cleanest option to do it because the other option, if we did any kind of transfer, we would want to do some kind of a loan agreement basically to the other fund and get paid back. So this is probably one of the cleanest ways to do it at this point.
I think I like 2A, but I'd be curious as you work through the general fund and the implications, like just gauging your thoughts after you see how the final numbers are playing out.
Yeah.
But I agree. It seems like you have reserves for emergencies and significant needs, and this seems like a significant need and kind of an emergency.
This one I would,
Especially with the timing of it coming up, like if this came up at the very beginning of the budget season, we might have planned other things differently, but at this point, it's like, do we really want to rehash
right.
the whole last meeting and or before that, or?
That's kind of why I'm saying moving forward, it's okay. And then what we can do is put a commitment down to say, we will rebuild our reserves to this amount over the next couple of years. I think that's a very strategic way to go about it. Realizing that if you do have to spend it down, you just commit to building it back up again.
Can that somehow be incorporated in the way we plan for and think about and talk about the next future increases? You know, incorporating this in 2023, we spent down the general fund balance to offset the negative balance we had accrued. So let's look at how we pay that.
It would have if we had done a loan to the funds, but since we're just reducing the fees, it's a little bit more nuanced. Yeah. Or I guess it's a little bit more straightforward that you're just reducing the fees rather than if we were to do a transfer, that would be a loan.
Yeah.
And then you could commit to repaying that back. They did that in Uray when they did, I talked to Patrick about this and he said they did that in Uray when they built the hot springs there. And they basically it was an enterprise fund and they ended up kind of taking a loan out from the general fund. And then 5 years later, the council decided to forgive the loan. But it was the intent to pay it back.
This is like pretty far out there tangent, but do we anticipate income from any of our housing programs, or is our goal to break even?
Eventually, I would like to have a fully functioning housing authority that would create income for a full-time position. Yeah.
This is essentially a break even.
Yeah, it would be essentially a break even. Yeah.
But like our land banking and housing development stuff isn't intended to like become a source of income for the town above the needs to administer the program.
Not with the numbers we have. We'll likely have to supplement it for quite a while.
So we're putting all of our eggs in the tourism remaining strong and the community continuing to grow basket.
We are.
Okay.
Let's preserve those spaces for light manufacturing or industrial or, and build on single lots. That's all I gotta say. More people. Do you see, like, if we reduce the admin fees now, you see that being kind of a policy decision in the future, or it'll really be much more nuanced when the rate study comes out?
And I would say it's a stop fix right now. And then when the rate study comes out, we can look at the actual calculations that they provide us. And I hope they're really extensive.
This is really exciting.
We've been doing
Yeah.
so much work for them.
like 2 years, yeah.
Let's hope the rate study doesn't find that we need to increase our admin fees.
And I have talked to the standard about this, prepping them that we might be talking about this tonight. To try and get information out as soon as possible to our residents. This wouldn't be until they get billed in February. So it would go into effect on January 1st with those 2 billings. So.
Did we do back-to-back month billings for any reason?
Yeah, we did. We were behind on one.
I was very behind.
Okay, so
Went out.
supposed to get billed in October, we got billed November and December.
No.
You got-
The
Supposed to get-
period, the billing period is the same. It's always the same. But the last round of bills, not the ones that went out that are due at the end of December, but the round that went out before that, that was due at the end of October, went out at the end of September.
Yeah.
When they should have gone out at the beginning of September.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we always fund, all the bills are 2 months in the past.
So people still paid the right amount for the year, they just paid a month
Mhm.
late-ish.
Yes.
Of their own.
Kind of.
So their first bill, since this would be enacted in January, would be.
It will go out at the beginning of
Mhm.
January, but it will not be due until the end of February.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve option 2A as presented?
One other quick technicality on that. So if you're paying with auto pay, it just automatically updates and that just automatically goes for residents.
Did you say in theory?
Well, we've had some technical issues with some specific accounts, but not
Yeah.
it.
In
Really
general,
makes
yes,
sense.
express bill pay. If you have auto pay set up, you can,
It just goes.
it just goes. You can set it up to go out 5 days before or on the day or any time in between.
So those residents don't necessarily have to think about writing an additional amount. It will just automatically happen for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can make a motion to adopt option 2A.
And I'll put this in the meeting packet so that it's reflected and update the memo as well, so that all of this is reflected.
So moved, or second? Yeah.
Thank you.
Trustee Edwards,
Yes.
trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes.
All right. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Are you ready to stop thinking about numbers?
No, not yet. I still got like a couple more days to just knock it all out.
Ooh.
We don't have any, don't need to ask about
Mm-mm.
public comment, but all right, the time is 7:30 PM and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 7:30.